So I go to YouTube, closing that out, go to subscriptions. So I go to YouTube, closing that out, go to subscriptions.
All right, let's do this again. You're talking over the
YouTube,
intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've all been waiting for.
All right, let's do this again.
Grab a hold of your pocket
over
protector.
the intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've all been waiting for.
All right, let's do this again.
Grab a hold of your pocket
Intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've all been waiting for.
All right, let's do this again. Intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've been waiting for.
All right, let's do this again. Intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've been waiting for.
All right, let's do this again. Intro. JS, you're talking over the intro.
It's that time you've been waiting for.
All right, let's. All right, John, let's try this again from the start. JS, you were looping audio somehow.
I have him muted, Colin. Ready?
Okay, I'm going to mute as well. All right, ready to go.
Okay. I have him muted, Colin. Ready?
Okay, I'm going to mute as well. All right, ready to go.
I have him muted, Colin. Ready?
Okay, I'm going to mute as well. All right, ready to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time you've all been waiting
I have him
for.
muted.
So grab a hold of your pocket protectors
Okay, I'm gonna
and
mute as
join
well.
us
All right,
for
ready to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time you've been waiting
I have him
for.
muted.
So grab a hold of your pocket protectors
Okay, I'm going to
and
mute. All right,
I got
ready to go.
feedback.
ladies and gentlemen,
I gotta
it's
figure
that
out what
time
the
you've
feedback's
been waiting
I have him
for.
muted.
So grab a hold of your pocket protectors
Okay,
and
is that coming from you then? I thought that was coming from JS. I guess not.
I had YouTube open.
Ah, that'd do it.
Okay.
Muting again.
Okay. There we go.
ladies and gentlemen, it's that time you've all been waiting for. So grab a hold of your pocket protectors and join us for Nerd World.
Welcome to Nerd World, episode 63. We have some technical challenges to overcome once again. I think by episode 100, we'll have this all figured out, huh, Colin?
It seems that we have been out nerded by Zoom and or YouTube. Yeah.
Zoom says we do not have permission to live stream when we do custom streaming services from the Zoom interface over directly to our YouTube channel. So we're doing it manually and it's working. I don't have it open because it's feeding back on.
Give me a hold of Gordon Moore right now. I
Yes.
want this problem fixed.
That's the problem right there.
And that's today's subject matter. Gordon Moore, who used to work at Fairchild and then is one of the founders of Intel.
Yes. Fairchild Semiconductor, which the people understand. Yeah. So the whole thing here about the technology behind computers is semiconductors. And a semiconductor is neither a conductor nor a non-conductor. It's what it says, a semiconductor. And Gordon Moore, back in the 1960s, he basically predicted that every 18 months or so, computer processing power would double at around the same cost of development. And we're at an interesting time when it appears the last few years that may no longer be happening. But for, what was it, like 40, 42 years, he was pretty much dead on.
Longer than
He
that.
he made that prediction in 1956 in a paper, I think. 50.
No, I think it was 65 actually.
Okay, there was a 5 in there somewhere. Okay. But yes, so it's been a long time. It's been longer than Intel has been around and longer than computers have been accessible at retail. So,
And now basically what we have driving the industry these days, well, it was porn for a long time, but I think everybody's pretty happy with downloading from Pornhub at this point. So it's the gaming industry really that is pushing the requirements of computers further and further and further.
who knew you could actually reach maximum porn?
We've reached maximum porn. Well, I don't know. There are some people who say porn should not be consumed at 8K.
Well, I mean, it's more unpleasant at 8K. It's sort of like being a voyeur 6 inches from the action. It sounds like a great thing, but in practice, not so good.
I don't know. I don't have personal experience with this. I can only imagine.
Well, I mean, people were making this joke as if it's common knowledge, but the porn industry drove innovation for many years.
Yeah, it did.
Including online transactions, credit card processing, and this sort of thing. And one would hope that there's another driver of innovation out there. It may, in fact, be quantum computing going forward. But there's a relatively old joke that the corollary to Moore's law is every 2 years the number of people who predict that Moore's law will be no longer in effect doubles.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
and so if you ask Ray Kurzweil, he'll say he published a new book in which he hasn't really said a whole lot of new things.
No, he says the same stuff for the last 20 years.
Which is good. It means his predictions are more or less on point, or you just push the predictions out far enough that you can say the same thing for 20 years and still sell a book. But one of the things that he points out is innovation has continued at a a logarithmic rate, which is impressive, despite everyone claiming that Moore's law is falling apart. Now you can look at it in a couple different ways. Back in 72, Intel released their first processor. They had at was it 10,000 nanometers?
It was the 404. That was their first one.
Yeah, 4004 processor, and I think it was a 10,000 nanometer process.
Yeah.
It was
Basically, just to kind of really explain this. So what you've got are transistors that are sitting on a piece of silicon like that, although my fingers are like 1,000,000 times bigger than those transistors. And so what we've been having happen is the transistors are getting closer and closer and closer. That's increased density. And the more that happens, the more we get faster computers and more powerful computers. There is a problem.
The transistors themselves are being produced at a smaller size, so they can get closer and closer together.
Yeah. The other
back in 72, the transistors were about the size of a red blood cell.
Right? Yes. And the closer they get together and smaller or whatever, the more they heat up. And that is one of the big issues that we've got now. So what I've decided to do when I set up my 17 Game Boys in series to make a supercomputer, I'm going to do it in the refrigerator so I can cool everything down.
Mm.
It's an experiment, but maybe I'll put it on TikTok.
I have a graph I want to show. I'm gonna do a screen share on this because
Please do, John.
the graphics look best like this.
Whoa. Okay.
So this is Moore's law. I'm sure it's hard to see. The number of transistors on microchips doubles every 2 years, all the way back to 1971 with the introduction of the Intel 4004, and up to today. According to this graph, they're showing like 20 trillion. I haven't found any chips that go up that high.
Well, they're kind of cheating here, John, because you've got 72 cores. So realistically, that's like 72 chips, really, when you think about it.
Well, so this brings us to another point. You in a single core, that is a single processor in the sense of a processor from the 70s and 80s and early 90s. You have one thread, one thing that can be done. In a multi-core processor, you have effectively separate processes that can happen, so you can have true multi-threading in your computing environment, so your computer can do more than one thing at a time. But the speed of each core has remained relatively stagnant recently. So this is how they improve the performance of computers now, by adding more cores, because you can't increase the speed of the processor necessarily.
You have two listed speeds, Colin: single core and multi-core.
Right.
And the problem
so multi-core describes multi-core is describing the performance of the computer, whereas a single core is describing the performance of a single element of the CPU.
But what happens with a lot of the software is they can't break it, or they haven't broken it down into small processes, and therefore they can't take advantage of all the cores. Now, some software works with iterative processes or repetitive processes and things like that. And graphics actually are a very good thing for using multiple cores. So that's why multiple cores tend to work really well in getting better images in gaming and better frame rates and stuff.
So the
graphics and processing cryptocurrency transactions.
The graph I just showed, like Colin said, is logarithmic, and hence looks like a straight line because it's exponential, and it's hard to show that. It's hard to show exponential on a graph, on one piece of paper, and so they do it logarithmic, so you get a linear type impression. So this is an interesting graph, and the largest count on a chip that I found is the Cerebrus, and it has 2.6 trillion transistors, MOSFETs, on one die.
Did you read that there are more transistors on chips manufactured per year than there are leaves on trees in the world?
I'm sure. Who counted the leaves on the trees?
Well, me and a few other guys did it. It was a slow week.
One summer, yeah.
It was slow.
So that brings up a good point. I have a bone to pick with
Start over again. Darn.
I have a bone to pick with the nomenclature for GPU. GPUs are moving into the AI realm, and to call them a GPU, I think, is silly these days.
Well, just they're symmetric multiprocessing devices.
Yes.
They are effectively massively multi-threaded computers.
Did you watch the Tesla announcement?
Yeah,
on Friday.
And that was a fascinating look into what can be done with custom silicon. Sorry?
What's that, Jess?
Did they actually prove Elon Musk is a moron?
On Friday?
No.
Actually, so that event, the Tesla AI Day,
yep,
the second AI Day 2022, was primarily an engineer recruitment event. They went into great detail about the custom silicon that they're developing, and some robotics that they're working on. It was really quite interesting.
I'm wondering if we should have JS switch his mic to the other one, because this one's breaking up, JS. It's like it's clipping. Because every time you talk, it clips like the first word.
Here I am, an audio professional. Okay, let's try.
I would go back to the PTZ. At least it won't break up.
Is that better?
That's way better.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's roomy, but it'll work.
Yeah, because
right.
that thing's clipping, and we're missing every time you start a sentence. It clips you out.
I promise the 4 people who may actually watch this that I will have better sound next week.
Yeah,
or month.
you've got 50,000 worth of microphones 10 feet away from you.
Well, yeah, just.
But
I've been dabbling in other things lately. The room is sort of set up for other stuff, which it shouldn't be, but it is.
Are you building jewelry in that room?
Well, yeah. So there's I have this thing is all set up for doing YouTube videos. Oh, wait, that's what we're doing here. I should be at the other desk, actually, where it's really set up for doing YouTube.
Nice.
But it's a more comfortable chair, right?
Well, my back was really hurting today.
Yeah.
Well, no, the chair you're in is a more comfortable chair.
Yeah,
That's
we
what
are.
matters.
So
Okay.
Friday, like Colin said, was a recruiting mechanism. However, each one of the department heads went through their platform for AI, and they're significantly ahead of all the other auto manufacturers because they have this AI platform. They have 3 million cars on the road that's acquiring data and feeding that back into their neural networks.
Yes.
And they're doing the labeling. And so they're so far ahead of everybody else in that regard.
Well, the other amazing thing about that is, and where they are poised really well. So some people know that I was volunteering with the IEEE on a committee that had a bunch to do with 5G standards and 6G standards for communications. And half the world is afraid of 5G because they think it's going to burn their brains out. And the other half of the world says, where the hell is it? And we have a very, very poor implementation of a very poor standard right now. And 6G isn't even scheduled to get anywhere until 2030. And so now you have Elon Musk, who's got these low-lying satellites. And guess what? They can communicate with all the Tesla cars.
Not only that, they recently signed a deal with T-Mobile. Their second generation satellites, which they're starting to deploy now, are actually capable of transmitting and receiving cell signals from a standard phone.
But limited bandwidth.
Limited bandwidth, of course, because you have a very small antenna in your phone.
Correct.
But
where we are now in terms of this kind of race as we move forward with technology to a large extent is gaming as well, but entertainment, I would say, VR, AR. So we really are trying to get 1.5 terabit synchronous communication going with a decent saturation. And there's nothing about the IEEE standards of 5G, 6G that's going to help get that through anytime soon. And it looks like Musk, with his satellites and his cars, could probably get to a point where that's reality sooner rather than later.
You get 1.5 terabits per second on a backplane of like a high-end Cisco router. But as far as any sort of open air wireless protocol, I haven't seen anything go that high yet. Not
yet. But that's a goal for VR, AR.
Yeah, but that'll definitely cook the conspiracy theorists' brains, though.
Yeah. Right.
Well, but you see, where we want to go with this is in a few years from now, you want to come and watch the football game in my house. The idea is you come and you virtually sit on the couch with a bunch of other people, and you can interact with the the 3 million pixel glasses that, and probably when it comes to watching the game, you can watch it from the end zone. He can watch it from the 50-yard line. She can watch and this is what you need. You need that higher level of synchronous communication in order to be able to do that.
So ultra wideband within a room, like you're talking about, I think I've seen that as high as like 10, in between 10 to 40 gigabits per second. Colin, you've seen that.
Oh no, not terabit. I'm sorry. It is gigabit.
Okay.
1.5 gigabits per second.
That's doable. They can.
I'm sorry, I screwed up.
I was like,
well,
what's
Mr.
that
Ray told me
factor of 10 here and there.
gigabits. I'm sorry, that's what we're looking at.
What does JS have in San Francisco that we don't have, Colin?
Pretty much every tech company in the United States. So
He's got.
So if anybody's going to have a terabit connection, it's going to be there. But
ultra wideband,
no,
does 10.
I'm still using SneakerNet, so
yeah.
Well, so SneakerNet is fun for nerds because we know the reference. But for those who don't, SneakerNet is what you do when you take a disk out of one computer and you run across the room and you plug it into another computer.
Well, I guess at this point, we should probably let the cat out of the bag for a lot of people that are watching this. You know what the cloud is? It's just somebody else's hard drive.
Yeah, that's all right.
Well, we had a discussion about this 4 years ago, was it? We were talking about this.
Yeah, but people still aren't aware.
And cloud people haven't caught on. But the fact is,
we do an episode on cloud computing.
We did. Oh yeah,
we did a whole.
You don't remember that?
Yeah.
But it's true, just as true now as it was then. There have been some significant advances in virtualization since then, though. So you have quite a bit better security and so on. But a lot of these things are still just little scripts that run to maintain the facade of separate computing infrastructure, when really you're just running on one computer that you're sharing with 24 people, using processors that have 64 and 100 or 128 cores, and they're just dividing up the computing resources. So
a lot of government agencies right now are employing SneakerNet essentially, because the idea here is if everything's in the cloud and the internet goes down, guess what? We got nothing.
Yep.
If you don't have the stuff you need on a local drive somewhere or access to it, then what are you going to do? So, communications is one thing. And certainly with the internet down, that's crippled heavily, but the ability to actually defend or do a lot of other things could be problematic as well. So I like the fact that I have stuff backed up in the cloud, but I also like the fact that I have stuff here backed up as well.
Yeah, at one point there were a class of products that were being marketed as personal cloud computing.
Yeah.
And what they were network attached storage. They were, network attached storage, a chassis with like 3 or 4 hard drives in them that you put in your house, and they were marketing them as personal cloud, when really, no, it's neither of those things. It's just storage.
Good marketing.
It is great marketing.
Yeah.
But so circling back here, we have chips with huge core counts now, and that's how we simulate high performance when we haven't been able to increase clock speeds significantly for many years. You'll notice that if you've bought a computer over the last 10 years, you've not gone much you would start at something like
3 to 4 gigahertz.
Right.
AMD and Intel, though, the new chips, 5.
their new ones are AMD's new chips are approaching 6 gigahertz, which is a new
5.7.
threshold.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
New
But
threshold.
the other thing too is I'm hearing a lot of people with the new iPhone, if they are going on WebRTC programs, apps and stuff, the phone overheats and shuts down.
Well, this is the problem. So when you're building a chip with smaller transistors, the reduction in size of the transistor increases its efficiency and reduces the losses due to heat. The problem is, if you reduce the size of a transistor, you're inclined to add more transistors in that space, which is a reasonable thing to do. So in the 70s, you were dealing with chips that are about 1 centimeter across, and now you're dealing with chips that are about 10 times that.
The actual array, the chip
The
array.
actual physical die that
the die size,
so you have more heat generated, or an equal amount of heat generated for substantially more transistors, which is okay, but it still limits. You're still thermal throttling when you're dealing with high transistor counts. So there's been a lot of advances in cooling solutions, and of course it's relatively common now, or relatively easily accessible to home users to get water cooling for their computer and this sort of thing. But it's still a problem. You can't do that with a phone.
Thermodynamics cooling system that they've got now that's pretty amazing, that develops what they call fluid electricity. So you not only have these two fluids that are helping to cool the units down, but they're actually creating energy. Because that's another thing. The thing is,
I hadn't come across that. I was familiar with vapor cooling.
This is not, you can't buy it. It's just, being developed. Because the big problem that we have now is, for years and years and years, I used like a 240 watt, or how big was the power supply? 320 or what?
The old
Now
85 watts.
Yeah.
Now you've got graphics cards that require 600 watts just for the graphics card.
Yep.
Which is insanity. So you got to try and reduce power use.
But there you're dealing with devices that have, you can get graphics cards over 1,000 cores at this point.
But look at the new 4000 series that's coming out. Holy cow! They're using DDR6 memory.
These are NVIDIA graphics cards that you're talking about. Yeah, they're insane. So what you're ending up here with is a massive parallel processing capability, which is what you need to render
real-time graphics.
Not ray tracing. Real-time ray tracing and these sorts of things.
Unreal Engine, which is real-time ray tracing, requires big horsepower to run.
Yeah. And of course, Unreal Engine is what's used for a lot of television productions at this point.
Colin, why don't you talk about why people say that Moore's law is going to end? Tell them about the physics.
So there are the issues of physical capability. That is, we were dealing with 10,000 nanometer spacing, or
I have a slide.
Transistor size.
I have a slide right here.
So
10 micrometers.
Right. So we started there in the early 70s, and now we're down to 2 nanometer. And what we're talking about here is we went from about 100 atoms across to 5 atoms across? 2 nanometer?
3 or something.
The graphene, I say.
Well, So that's the thing. There are other materials that one can use other than silicon with some of these things. And so that's they're looking
Molybdenum rules.
there you go. So we're looking at different types of materials and different types of structures of transistors on a die on the silicon, which is, by the way, just essentially just etched with a laser is essentially how you're building these things now.
What you're saying is we're reaching
the physical the limit of that physics imposes on creation of an object. You can't have a thing more than less than one atom in size. So we're running out of capacity in that sense.
But can you move from electrons to photons? And how big of
I have a quantum singularity in the fridge.
Is that where it went?
Mhm.
It disappeared from CERN. I think it only lasted a 10th of a second or something, and then it disappeared and it showed up in your fridge, huh?
Did you see the Nobel Prizes released yesterday on quantum entanglement?
Yeah, so you got two atoms like this, and then you pull this atom away and you send it across the universe, and apparently they still have a relationship to one another, which is amazing because I have cousins I haven't seen in like 20 or 30 years. I wouldn't even know what they looked like.
So isn't that perfect for public key encryption though? Quantum entanglement.
One hope so.
One paired key using quantum entanglement. That sounds like it's a perfect.
Well, I give Colin one atom, I give you one atom, and I keep one atom.
Nice. One atom 12. So we're down to about 3 nanometers right now. I think
supposedly the new Apple chips which are produced by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, are 2 nanometer.
So what's the difference then between ARM and say the chips that AMD and Intel have been making?
How do you explain that?
ARM. So what they've done there is the ARM are what are called reduced instruction set chips, which means
RISC.
Yeah, RISC. So what you're dealing with is, so the ARM consortium defines the ARM specification, and they are RISC processors. They have a reduced instruction set that makes it more efficient. It allows for greater efficiency in the construction.
Isn't that what we got in all these guys?
Yeah, all the Snapdragon chips that come out of Samsung are all ARM, and most of the.
So let's put this in a little perspective real quick. This phone right here, which is, I have a Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. This phone has far more power than all the computers that were employed in the Apollo space missions. And all the computers that existed on the planet Earth during that period.
True.
All of them.
True.
This is more powerful than all of those put together.
So I listened to a podcast from Lex Friedman. He's my favorite podcaster these days. He has about just over 2 million subs, and he's like a scientific Joe Rogan. Right?
He's an AI and robotics researcher. And the first couple of times I saw this guy, I thought he might be an AI himself. I mean, he's the stiffest interviewer I have ever seen.
He wears a black suit and a skinny black tie. He's Russian by birth. He went to MIT, got his PhD at MIT. He's a researcher at MIT, and he's got a very successful podcast.
And he squeaks when he walks.
And he interviewed one of the researchers at NIST, NIST. You guys know what NIST is, Colin?
Yeah,
the National Institute of
Standards. Yeah.
Okay. They are working on a hybrid computing platform that uses optics in part of the computer and then still traditional electrons where you can use electrons. So interconnectivity all based on optics, and then the slower stuff that still is good using and more readily available to use electrons, and they're seeing a factor of 100x performance on these new platforms. So that's super exciting. Yeah, just do Lex Friedman NIST, and you'll find this podcast.
And this is still basic NOR gates and AND gates. We're talking about 1 and 0.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're not doing quantum. They're just doing a hybrid approach to a standard binary computer. Correct.
Yeah, so people should understand that too. And that is, when they talk about AI and they talk about machine learning, first of all, somebody actually has to program the AI. You have to continue. This is why Python, we did a study recently, a client and I, Python programmers will be in vogue for like at least 7 years. In 2 years from now, the average pay for a Python programmer, you heard it here first, 350,000 US per year.
But gas is going to cost $20 a gallon.
Maybe, it's possible. But when you look at all computers up until today, it's really simple. Zeros and ones, zeros and ones. Now, so far, science has looked at our brains, and we don't break down things into zeros and ones. That's not how the human mind works.
Well,
so,
this goes back to the history of AI a little bit. So first of all, Python, I hate Python. My problem with Python is that it is not white space agnostic.
It doesn't.
Unlike every other programming language on the face of the earth.
Quinoa. I don't like quinoa, but it's here to stay. Okay, Colin?
Well, this is right. And so the reason it's here to stay was initially because Red Hat decided to build all of their admin tools using Python, which is obnoxious, but I could deal with that. What we found recently in the last 6 or 7 years is that all the AI tool sets are all Python based, which drives me up a fucking wall.
They are.
But millions and millions and millions compared to, I can't even remember what it's called now. There's a few competing languages, but they've got thousands.
There's Perl and Ruby and a bunch of other scripting languages out there. But
Ruby on Rails,
Ruby on Rails was a gigantic disaster. I'm trying to refrain from describing it the way I'd prefer to describe it. But real quick,
what I was just going to say is, until you get to a point where instead of dealing with zeros and ones, you're dealing with essentially an infinite range in between the two. Now, it won't ever be infinite, but when the decision sets are multiple, then you're going to see this major change in computing. That is when the robots will take over and either will rule us or allow us all to just sit around on divans all day long, popping grapes in our mouth. One of the two.
Let's for a moment go back and look at the history of AI. So back in the 70s, this was a very in vogue area of research, and people theorized that you could create a neural or simulate a neural network within a computer with a bunch of essentially yes/no questions, a network of nodes. The simplest example would be looking at an image. Is it red or is it blue? Is it red? Yes, it's red. Is it blue? Yes or no, etc. Is it shaped like a head? Yeah, circular. Yes, no, and so on. So you work down this tree. These were just theoretical back in the 70s because there wasn't enough computing power to make them.
In fact, further than that, when did Alan Turing come up with the Turing test?
When was that?
The 50s.
Later in his life, but when was it?
In the 50s.
It was in the 50s? I thought it might have been the 40s. Okay. So the Turing test.
Maybe it was the 40s. I thought it was the 50s.
Could be.
Still.
Stand by.
You have an iPad there. You can look it up.
People watching this, Gen Xers and Gen Zers, and what they're like the 50s, the 40s, that you might as well be talking about like.
At this point, we have to start prefixing
1950.
1950, right? Yeah, there you go. So the Turing test, for those who don't know, is a theoretical. Is something that Alan Turing theorized, wherein you communicate with a being. It is either a computer or a human and the person communicating is not made aware of which they're communicating with. And if they can't tell the difference after a certain period of time, after a certain length of interaction, then that being, be it computer or human, passes the Turing test.
Oddly enough, Colin, you haven't passed the Turing test, have you?
Well, I feel like I have. I'm not so sure about Lex Friedman, but so the point is that AI research is premised in this idea that you can simulate a neural network. You didn't have the computing power to do it in the 70s, and in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen a revolution in AI development, primarily around the symmetric multiprocessing systems.
It's all about that data
Right.
from
Well,
Star Trek.
It's the symmetric multiprocessing that you can do with NVIDIA GPUs and just basic the multi-core CPUs out there. The
Ingesting data.
The interesting thing, though, is that because these models were conceived of in the 70s when you had 8-bit processors, they're optimized for 8-bit processors. That is, a number is a number within the system is represented only by 8 bits, whereas now you have 64-bit processors, so a number can be represented by 64 bits. Now, John, what are the limits of an 8-bit number?
0, 8.
2 to the 8, 2 to the 8, 256.
Yes, there you go. And so these neural networks were conceived of as simple logic gates. So you only need an 8-bit processor to do it because that's what they had, and they didn't.
You are standing on a street. To your right is a saloon. To your left is a house of ill repute.
Oh, that's a great street to be on.
That seems reasonable, yeah.
My kind of street.
So what we're dealing with here are models.
Yes.
What we're dealing with here are models conceived of in the 70s where they had only 8-bit processors, so they're optimized for 8-bit processors. So what do we see developed out of Tesla now? Their custom silicon are highly packed 2-nanometer process-based 8-bit processors. So you can effectively fit 16 times?
And the robot that they had
4 times or 16 times, I guess 16 times the computing power on that same silicon size, because you don't need to represent a number with 64 bits. You can represent it with 8, because those are the only numbers that matter in modeling a neural network.
Well, here's another reason why that tends to work. So when you look at computers, they differ from toasters, they differ from ovens, they differ from refrigerators. Those are all purpose-built appliances. They do 1 or 2 or 3 things. Your computers are designed to do a multitude of things. Now, if you can take a scenario where the register, the brain, if you will, is kind of hardwired to a point where it can focus on a specific task, instead of having to have all these programs occupying and all this other stuff that makes it available to do a billion different things. Now you're talking about speed of execution, you're talking about taking up less room, and so on and so forth. And so that is effectively where the next step is. What's happening is that you'll have a programmable part, like firmware based. I'm not communicating this right, but you know what I'm talking about.
Well, purpose-built computers are inherently going to be more efficient than
but you can change it
because you don't need to
on the fly, though.
You just don't need to accommodate, right? You don't need to accommodate them doing many different things. You need to accommodate them doing one thing. So the same thing applies, for example, for Apple computers, right? Apple built an operating system and they deployed that operating system on like 6 or 8 models of computer that they sell. Whereas as Microsoft built an operating system, but they need to accommodate an infinite number of models of computer conforming to some general standards, but within those standards you have infinite variety. So that's why you see performance issues in Windows that you don't see in Mac OS.
But why don't you see that in Linux?
Linux, you do to some extent.
Not like Windows.
You're still dealing with a limited subset of computers. You don't find that Linux works well on everything, although it's gotten a lot better in the last 15 years. It's optimized in ways that Windows just isn't.
But one of the other big points, and we're starting to come to an inflection point on this, is the collection of data that feeds back into the neural network. So in addition to having these very sophisticated CPUs, GPUs, which I hate that name GPU, I'm on a mission to change that acronym to something else that's more appropriate, is the amount of data. If you watch the Tesla presentation, you see how these systems, these neural networks learn, is because they're feeding them petabytes of data. Just like what's that AI drawing program? The one everybody likes.
DALL-E 2.
Yeah. So they've got terabytes and terabytes, probably exabytes of pictures that they're able to use as data for these inference engines. And so having that data feed back in, I'll tell you what, guys, I've been playing a lot of chess on chess.com lately. All the computers now just crush everybody. They're so far ahead of the grandmasters, it's not even funny now.
Or if you wanted to create a story, or if you wanted to create a game or whatever, there are a lot of AI interfaces that they go out, you type in fight the dragon. It goes out on GitHub and it automatically delivers you lines of code. Okay, what is this? Go get a sword and a shield and blah, blah, blah. It's fascinating. The ones that create stories, okay, who is the main protagonist? And you type in the name and tell us some stuff about this person. You type it in or what, and then it gives you a story after you give it a few details or whatever.
So my friends are using that platform, OpenAI, now for SEO.
By the way, OpenAI is not free. People should know that. It's a misnomer.
Yeah. So they're using that platform to instantly create a platform of 10,000 WordPress sites with all of those articles spun on OpenAI and then immediately deployed. It's unbelievable.
So, which, as we move further into the future on all this stuff, and not that it really relates to what's going on, but there will certainly be a job of the computers and administrators and other people to deal with all the deep fakes, all the potential abuses that are going to just be easier and easier and easier to come up with. I already feel personally there is an over-democratization. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I think there's an over-democratization in a lot of things right now. And what winds up happening is we get people who are relatively incompetent that are practicing things that they probably need a lot more training, mentorship, and study with. And now you'll get people who don't know anything about writing calling themselves writers because they've learned how to use an AI tool.
How about for VO? Is it making inroads into VO industry?
Yeah, so there's a program called The Script, which is really interesting. You can ingest recordings from somebody into the script and then feed it a text-based document and it will read it out. A lot of people know who Anthony Bourdain was. What a wonderful individual. I loved watching his programs about food and travel. And he committed suicide. They took 20 of his shows and they fed it into the computer. If you go online, and look up Anthony Bourdain documentary. They made a documentary after his death, and there was a mixture of the voiceover in there, which is his recordings that he had done prior to his death and the recordings he did after he died. And I am an audio professional. I know it doesn't sound like it because my voice is terrible at the moment, but I know I can tell you when audio doesn't sound right, and I can't really tell the difference between what is the computer-generated Anthony Bourdain voice and his own voice. It is that good.
Famously, very recently, James Earl Jones retired from voicing Darth Vader, and they're using an AI system to render that voice now.
I will no longer do this voice.
How about LaFontaine? Did they record him yet?
Who?
John LaFontaine?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the Inner World guy. But this is an interesting thing because for years and years, somebody does an iconic voice and they die. And then if you're a good mimic, maybe you could get work doing that voice. So I am a licensed voice for some characters like Papa Smurf, have a Smurfy good day, or Hermie from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I want to be a dentist. And I am imagining in just a short few years, that work won't be available because, look at like Disney. They own hours and hours and hours of recordings from all these people. All they have to do is figure out some sort of compensation, I guess. I guess they did that with James Earl Jones. They must have.
I'm sure. It's particularly interesting, though, if you look at the way technology replaces humans in certain jobs. During Tesla's AI Day last week, they just presented their initial models of their humanoid robot. One of which
they had to stop the demo early because the robot was threatening to tip over.
It didn't look as impressive as it might be, but on the bright side, Elon Musk wasn't throwing a ball at a window and having the bulletproof glass break. The point that I was getting to, though, is they're using these neural network models to allow the robot to learn how to walk and how to interact with its environment.
So it can look before it goes to pick something up and not only determine how it needs to do that, but it can determine what the material is made out of, so it knows how much pressure to apply before it breaks it or damages it.
I was particularly concerned, actually, when they were describing the hand with non-back drivable joints. Yeah. That is, you don't have to apply power to the hand to get it to continue to grip something. Well, when the robots come for you and grab you by the neck, even if you turn the robot off, it's not going to release your neck. So that's not good.
What to notice here, Colin, is this is a cheap hitman.
It is a very cheap hitman and disposable, in fact. But before we start theorizing about the rise of Skynet, what I was getting at, though, was that these devices will start to take over jobs in warehouses and factories and so on.
Nuclear power plants.
My job.
And will be able to essentially be a drop-in replacement for a human. Which
you're saying that a robot is going to be able to come here on NerdWorld and abuse you like I do?
Well, yeah, and we won't be able to ignore him when he does it like we do you. But the interesting point here, though, is this has happened in the past. There are plenty. Auto workers threw a fit in the early '80s when robots started operating.
When's the last time you saw an actual teller at a bank in person?
No, they're still there.
I don't know. They still have tellers.
Still at my.
When have you personally gone to see one?
A month ago, I guess.
A month ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's I get your point, and you're not wrong.
Okay.
But while we're talking,
when was the last time you contacted a travel agency to make arrangements
Never.
for you? to go
Never.
somewhere?
8 months ago, 8 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah. The point I'm making is at one point,
These things
it
were very
was
common.
viable to look at getting a career as a teller. Now,
Yeah.
very few.
Well,
I had a
part of the
friend
problem.
who-
All right, so you
friend of mine
have
made
very
a ton
few
of money
people.
as a travel agent, and then he was out of work, and so was like everyone else that was a travel agent. So there have been many. Now you're also looking at, because you scan the groceries, how much people don't notice how much quicker they get checked out, how much faster the lines move, and how they need less people.
Well, there I'm going to disagree with you, because I have taken to no longer going through the self-checkout just because every time something goes wrong, and inevitably something goes wrong, there's only one person to show up and service these 6 people who
Problem
are
is,
checking out at the same time.
You going through the self-checkout. That's
No, it's not. Every every one of these places is different, right? So
No,
if
I'm
you
not
go
talking about the self-checkout necessarily versus the cashiers that are doing it. See, before, the cashiers would have to look stuff up, or they'd have to remember prices.
right now, I have to look stuff up and
and
scan, numbers and memorize what a thing is, or what the PLU is for a thing, because they can't fit a barcode on it or whatever. The point is, it's not necessarily more efficient. I specifically avoid them because in each place they have different setups wherein
displaced workers.
I'll get there. I'm getting there. I really am. So they're set up differently. So if you are an adult, you're probably buying some sort of alcohol, and that kills the entire process, because the moment you scan a beer or anything in your groceries, everything comes to a grinding halt. So I just don't use them anymore. But yes, they're replacing lots of tellers, but they're not actually doing anything more efficiently. They're just doing it more cheaply. They're pushing the task onto the customer rather than employing someone to complete the task. At some point, you could have a robot doing that, yes, and that would be much more efficient. But in the meantime, you have robots that are now capable of doing more and useful things in other areas. But we saw this in the early 80s, where the UAW was throwing a fit because you had welding robots able to assemble a car and this sort of thing. Well, you're going to have humanoid robots that can just be a drop-in replacement for people in warehouses and factories and so on. And of course, Amazon is doing this already.
White collar.
Amazon. We'll get there. So you were commenting on tellers. Now, you're right. Most bank tellers suck, and your bank teller sucks when you see a line of 30 people and 3 tellers, because that means the tellers can't count. And if the tellers can't count at your bank, that's a problem. But so they're getting to the point where we can have robotic drop-in replacements for human jobs, usually blue-collar jobs for the moment. But it really isn't as much of a problem as you'd think, because if you go back to the 1890s, you don't see any lamplighters anymore.
Candlestick makers.
No, lamplighters. People who walk around and light.
When's the last time you saw a candlestick maker?
Or those guys who would go out and collect your dead,
or a basket weaver. I mean, but the point is, or a stagecoach driver. The point is, these jobs shift over time. This is to be expected. And just that we're seeing it that much faster now is not inherently a problem. Now, to your point, though, about white collar jobs, you have AI out there that can simulate the work of a human with varying degrees of success. One that particularly concerns me is is research papers. So this is where we go back to misinformation, one of everyone's favorite topics these days, where you can have an AI written research paper, right? You set a GPT-3, which is a very impressive model out of Google, DeepMind. You can give it a task, write a paper in thus and such a form with thus and such information. But I imagine there's going to be a point where you can set it that task and then go find references to support this position that it's been instructed to take, and it can write the best research paper citing the best sources that can be found all across the internet, supporting a position that may be completely nonsense, but it will still be the best written paper and most persuasive that it could possibly be. So,
And political issues, all kinds of stuff. And we have a problem right now where most people don't want to even do a slight deep dive on Amazon to see if a comment is real or not. So that's going to be a big problem. I think people are just going to have to learn to live without the truth in any way, shape, or form, and just realize that the truth is totally unimportant, and we must rely only on the impression that we give to people.
Yeah, that's fine. That works for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Unless you want to be a neo-Luddite.
Me? Well, yeah.
Who's gonna lead up that movement, Colin?
I don't know. But
it's got to happen. I mean,
I got my quantum singularity for sale on eBay right now, and the bidding is up to $47.80.
I would have thought it would stop at 42, but
42, baby.
But yeah, I don't know. There's got to be there. I imagine there's going to be a neo-Luddite movement, and it's going to be similar probably to the
There already is one, and when I say one, I mean thousands.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're out there. I bump into them. I see them on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
We have 5 minutes to wrap up the show because I have a call I got to take at 1:30.
So I was just going to say that it seemed like the neo-Luddite movements are going to take the same form as the Puritans. You know, they're going to go find some little country all of their own and be Luddites in green, green fields with no power and no cell phones and whatever.
They're semi-adaptive. I lived with the Pennsylvania Dutch, and they managed to sort of figure out kind of ways around things and such. And yeah, they'll be a semi-adaptive. But I think
but that's not they're
living off the grid.
Their choices are faith-based, whereas neo-Luddites their choices are primarily based on fear of technology.
Yeah.
Well, if you've seen the Terminator, right? I'm scared as shit at that guy. I would fuck you up. I swear to God, I would kill you right here just by looking at you. Don't even think about getting in the chopper.
Did you see For All Mankind? The last episode, For All Mankind?
No.
Oh, okay. There's neo-Luddites. Did you see the movie Contact?
Yes.
So that movement that was anti-contact is the neo-Luddite movement.
Ah, okay.
Same.
Well, I, for one, think that we do need the aliens to come back down again. And I'm okay. I don't mind. I'll go in the caves and I'll make the paintings of people with big heads and wings and stuff, and do all those things. If they come down here and they fix our atmosphere and our water and all that kind of crap.
But how about
so you'd prefer to welcome our alien overlords rather than welcoming our new robot overlords?
It's hard to say. 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. The problem with the robot overlords is they will have been programmed by us.
And so I have a lot less faith than the aliens, personally.
As long as the robot overlords aren't programmed to manufacture paper clips and nothing else.
Are you okay with the anal probe though, JS, from the aliens? That's the question.
Well, you know what? These guys are good. I'm just saying, I wake up with wires sticking out of my butt, and I'm like, I didn't feel a thing.
They're going to kill all your cows and then give you some anal probe. That sounds like love. to
Right.
me.
Why did the aliens in their home world decide that they were going to put dentists and sexual predators on these ships and send them to us? I don't get it. I just don't get it.
A lot like the English shipping all those people to Australia, Botany Bay, many years ago.
Yeah.
Very similar, I think.
I have figured out what UFOs are. It's some teenage alien sitting at home where his parents are gone. They're out for the night and they come home and he's got Johnny closed down that wormhole again. I was just flying my drone around the earth again.
Mhm.
That's what UFOs are.
That's it. And he's just, they're doing that, and they come down and but why the heck do they hang around New Mexico and Arizona? I mean, I would go to like the French Riviera, Barbados, there's better places.
I'll be right back.
There really are. And well, actually, John, hang on. We should. Okay.
John has to make a phone call right now.
Yeah, but we should probably
We
wrap
take this
this up.
very seriously, everybody. We're very serious about this show, as you can tell. You can tell that we rehearse.
But we should probably wrap this up because John has to go choke the Gartok, and I'll be back. And
I've had to pee for about 25 minutes now.
all right. Well, in that case, actually, we can't close down the show because John has control. So we're gonna have to wait for him. And while we do that, please do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, comment, etc., etc.
You pretend that you actually watch this and tell us how wonderful we look and sound and such.
Absolutely. And maybe we can think about how we can develop a neural
I
network
think
model.
you should get Frank on camera at this point. That's the only thing.
Frank is visiting his girlfriend.
Frank is with Molly?
Yes. They're 3 miles down the road, and I have to go pick up Frank just as soon as.
For those of you who don't know who Frank is while Colin did not pass the Turing test, Frank did, oddly enough. Frank is Colin's black lab and beloved.
He's a fun boy. He's
All
a
right.
very nice big boy.
I see it's 1:30.
It is 1:30, and we were just explaining that.
Clock on the wall says it's time to go.
Yeah, we were just explaining, John, that you have to go choke the Gartok, so we have to call it a day here.
Wow. Who's turning off my Siri remotely, Colin?
Turning off what? Your Siri?
Yeah, it just goes off.
I'd be more concerned if it goes on.
No, it goes on. It goes turn. I mean, like
Alexa, give J.S. Gilbert $10,000.
Okay, and that wraps up episode number 63.
That would be kind of cool if somebody was watching this and then, like, all of a sudden their Alexa said, "Okay, giving J.S. Gilbert $10,000."
What you really need to do is do a sleep-inducing ASMR thing for like 8 hours, and in the middle of it, start issuing commands to Google and Alexa and the Google Assistant and Alexa and so on to buy products and ship them to your own address. Or no, I guess you would have to ship them to a PO box or something. It won't let you do that, I know, but it would be entertaining.
All right, we will see you guys next time on
Same
NerdWorld.
bat channel, same bat time.
Oh yeah.
Will John Pretto ever escape from his white hole? Will Colin Hill ever monetize his breakfast pulse state? The answers to these and even more of the universe's greatest secrets next time on NerdWorld.